Caribbean journalists and
This meeting is being recorded.
and people from around the Caribbean just to understand different environmental issues and, of course, inform your perspectives as media practitioners to accurately report on this afternoon. So I will get the day going by giving time to the Cari-Bois Foundation's CEO, Mr. Omar Mohammed, to just give some brief remarks to start off the session this afternoon.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, good morning, maybe to some of you all. So I'm really happy that you all have made the time to join us today, especially on this very critical issue, which I hope all of us knew about. So why are we here? The Cari-Bois Foundation in 2020 launched this experiment called Cari-Bois Environmental News Network, which was really meant to provide a voice to citizens directly to the public. So having citizens be the conduit for their own experiences and issues, and working with them to tell those stories in a way that is that fits, tenets of journalism and makes them actually a force to be reckoned with within the sort of news cycle. So over the last few months, we've been working really hard, led by Tyrell, who is the coordinator for Cari-Bois, to expand the work of the Environmental News Network regionally. So far, we've been able to tell stories outside of Trinidad and Tobago across several countries on everything from plastic pollution to biodiversity loss, illegal mining, and so on. So another direction that we're hoping to take Cari-Bois in is just what we're doing today, which is being a resource primarily for journalists and other media practitioners within the Caribbean on environmental issues. Because we're very aware that environmental topics can be very complex and challenging, especially if you're not accustomed to the language, to the 1,000,001 acronyms, and to covering it that in a way that respects both the science and the politics. So today we're focusing on deep sea mining and the hotbed of issues that surround it, and also very surprisingly very contextual for us because it's all happening sort of headquartered in a place that's smack dab in the Caribbean. And it's also something that, again, many of us might be familiar with, but have never even thought of. So we're going to be led today by Tyrell, who's going to moderate the session. And we have three amazing panelists who will all share on different aspects of the conversation around deep sea mining. I'm just here to say thanks for joining us. So just remind folks to keep your mics off until we get to the Q&A section at the end. You can feel free to put your camera on. We always welcome seeing lovely faces of people who found the time to tune in. Also, we do understand that conversations like this can get very broad, and we all have pet peeves and hot button issues that we feel very passionate about. That may or may not be connected to the topic that we're talking about. But of course, in terms of time, we just ask that we keep questions and comments and contributions to the topic of deep sea mining. And of course, issues around the marine environment. We will have the three presentations and then the Q&A section at the end. And of course, we will work with the panelists to deliver some subsequent communication to you all in terms of slides, other supplemental material, and so on. So thank you all so much for participating this afternoon. And I'll hand it over now to Tyrell, who is our moderator for this afternoon.
All right, thanks a lot, Omar. I neglected to say it at the start, but my name is Tyrell Gittins, and as Omar have said, I'm the project coordinator of the Cari-Bois Environmental News Network. And for those who would have just joined us, previously speaking was Mr. Omar Mohammed, the CEO of the Cari-Bois Foundation. So I'm going to leave most of the talking to our incredible speakers this afternoon, but just to give you an idea of how this afternoon will flow, We have Dr. Diva Amon, Mr. Matthew Gianni, and Ms. Khadija Stewart, and they will all basically work towards giving you a holistic view of the issue of deep sea mining. So basically the science of it, the policy related to deep sea mining, and how you as media practitioners could effectively communicate it. As Omar would have said, there is time for questions at the end of the session. So you can feel free to make notes of your question or even put them in the chat, and we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. So not to take too much time away from our lovely panelists and presenters this afternoon, I'll first call on Dr. Diva Amon. Dr. Amon is a Caribbean marine biologist focused on the little known habitats and animals on the deep sea ocean and how actions are impacting them. She works at the nexus of science, policy, and communication. Dr. Amon has participated in research cruises around the world and has been featured on global outlets including Disney+, National Geographic, BBC, and CNN International. And, and she was also a 2022 National Geographic Emerging Explorer. So I'm now going to give Dr. Amon the opportunity to present.
Many thanks, Terrell, for having me, and Omar. Thank you for putting this very important panel on, and I'm delighted to be here. Let me just, hold on, share my screen, bear with me. Okay, so I hope that you're seeing a full screen slide at the moment. Thank you, Terrell, for that lovely introduction. I should also add that I am currently a scientific advisor at the Benioff Ocean Science Lab at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I'm also one of the directors and founders of Species, which is a Korean nonprofit focused on marine research, education, and advocacy based in Trinidad and Tobago. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, what is the deep sea, what is deep sea mining, and what are the potential impacts from deep sea bed mining. So let's start right at the beginning. So when we say deep ocean, what exactly are we referring to? Well, the deep ocean is everything from about 200 meters depth down to the deepest point on the planet, which is about 11,000 meters depth. And so that's everything on this map, which is dark blue. And so you can see that the deep sea is absolutely enormous. And in fact, actually provides about 96% of all habitable space on the planet. So that makes it Earth's largest ecosystem by far. It is vast, and that means a lot of it is remote. But there are, and in addition to the remoteness, there's also crushing pressures, near freezing temperatures, and a total absence of sunlight. And so what that means is that it's very, very difficult to study. You need a lot of high-tech equipment, which is very costly, and it's often very remote, et cetera. And so all of these factors mean that the deep sea is really poorly explored and poorly understood. So for the majority of the deep ocean, this question mark is basically what we know about it. We are unable to answer the question of what lives there, what do these species eat? How do they reproduce? How might they be impacted by human activities? And if we're struggling to answer those questions, then it's really difficult to be able to manage these activities effectively. And so just to give you a bit of context about how poorly explored we're talking about, we have better maps of the moon, Mars, and Venus than we do our own deep sea floor. And far less than 1%, so about 0.0001% of the deep ocean has ever been visualized, so seen with human eyes or had imagery captured of it of a camera. So again, this is just a part of the planet, the vast majority of the planet, that we have very, very little information and understanding of. But over the last century, improvements in technology have revealed that the deep sea is not what we once thought. It's not this, big, dark, boring, empty place. No, in fact, just like on land, there are a variety of habitats. So there are everything from coral gardens, which you can see in the top left, and those are home to actually, the deep sea is home to more species of coral than in shallow waters, which is not something that a lot of people realize. In the top right, there are lakes. Yes, you heard correctly, lakes at the bottom of the ocean that are made of super salty brine that sits on the deep sea floor. And then there are also seamounts. These are mountains at the bottom of the sea in the bottom left. And this is a particular one where thousands of mother octopus were found sitting with their eggs off Costa Rica. And actually somewhere that I'm going to be exploring next month, which I'm really excited about. And then in addition to all of these, there's flat sedimented plains, there's hydrothermal vents, there's canyons, there's trenches. Really, that list of environments goes on. And because of that big diversity in habitats, what that means is that there is really high biodiversity, a high number of species that live in the deep ocean. So it's thought that there are about 1 million species in the ocean. 2/3 of those still have not yet been discovered, and most of those are in the deep sea. And not only is new technology allowing us to see these species and find these habitats, but it's also allowing us to see these species in ways that we never have before. So in the bottom right here, low light cameras were used by some colleagues to actually show that this sea cucumber you can see here is able to create its own light in this amazingly beautiful display. And this is now known to be one of the most common forms of communication on the planet, bioluminescence, which creates light in the deep sea. So, but one of the most common traits of life in the deep ocean is that life is very slow. So most of the food from the deep sea actually comes from the sea surface, many kilometers above. And it does that in the form of marine snow, which is dead plankton, dead animals that drift down to the deep sea floor. And so there isn't much to go around. And so that means that animals tend to conserve their energy. They move slowly, they grow slowly, they have very slow metabolisms, they take a long time to become sexually mature, they reproduce very slowly. And some of them live to extremely old ages. So to give you some examples, the Greenland shark lives for over 400 years and only becomes sexually mature at 150 years old. Then we have deep sea tube worms that are known to live for over 1,000 years. Some corals in the deep sea that are known to live for over 4,000 years old. And then glass sponges that are known to live for over 11,000 years. And so think about that, right? Like one species being alive for 11,000 years. That's like triple the age of the wheel, for instance, right? Like think about all they would have seen in that time. And so what I want you to take away from this slide is that in the deep sea, time scales are completely different to what you and I are used to. And that means that the deep sea really doesn't deal well with change. It's very slow to recover from impacts as a result. And something else the technology is revealing is that the deep sea is really important. Its great size means that it provides some very big global functions, ecosystem functions and services that keep the planet healthy and keep us and all life on the planet alive effectively. So it's responsible for provisioning services like linked to billions of fisheries that billions of people around the world rely on. It's linked to marine genetic resources that are potentially a new source of medicine in the future or bioinspiration. It's also linked to regulating services like climate regulation. We know that the deep sea is critical for absorbing heat, as well as sequestering and storing carbon, which is now more important than ever. We also know it has roles in waste absorption, and also something that's often underestimated for the deep sea, has a cultural role to play in that it has educational value, aesthetic value, scientific value. We get value from knowing that it exists, from knowing that we are effective stewards of it, and for many communities around the world, there is also spiritual significance. So the deep sea is an important place. And so enters this idea about mining the deep sea for minerals. So there are 3 main deep sea mineral deposits that are being sought after, and they are all different in nature, where they are found, and what species live on them. But the mining process is generally quite similar for them. So I'll go through each one by one. So first we have polymetallic nodules. Those are currently the most sought after of the three minerals, resources. And those are found on the abyssal seafloor, so between about 4 and 6 kilometers depth. Then there are polymetallic sulfides. Those are found at hydrothermal vents, so on mid-ocean ridges, for instance, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And those tend to be found between 1 and 4 kilometers depth. And then there are cobalt-rich crusts. Those are found on seamounts, these mountains under the sea, between about 1 and 2.5 kilometers depth. And they're not found everywhere in the world, but they are scattered around the world. And so as you can see, each of them has different minerals that they're being targeted for. So when we say deep sea mining, what exactly do we mean? I hope this video is playing, but so we have some idea about the extraction process that might be used. So for instance, there's going to be a mining machine that you can see here that moves along the seafloor, basically mining the seafloor for these minerals. Here, these little black dots you can see are nodules. They're the polymetallic nodules, and they sit on the seafloor like cobbles on the street. So once the nodules are mined, they're pumped up to the surface via this pipe that you can see here that is connected to a ship which is waiting at the sea surface. And so these nodules this mixture that's being pumped up is nodules, which has minerals, sediment, and water. Then once it gets onto the ship, the nodules will be separated from the sediment and the water. And that waste sediment and water, which also probably has bits of minerals in it, is then pumped back into the ocean. And it's not sure what depth that's going to happen at yet. And we don't yet, and then the ship will drive to shore where the minerals will be processed, and we're not exactly sure what that process is going to look like. So this process you've just seen is going to be quite harmful. But we still are really struggling to wrap our heads around about how these deep sea ecosystems will really cope with these impacts. So there have been just a few tests done. You can see here one of the machines that was tested recently called Patania 2. And except these tests were on a very small scale to actual industrial mining. So we're not quite sure what the scale of these potential impacts is going to be, and the severity, although we do know they will be quite large and quite severe. So what exactly are the impacts looking like? So we know as that machine moves along the seafloor, we're going to see the seafloor being effectively destroyed. So you can see on the right of the picture, there are the nodules sitting on the seafloor, and then you can see a track where one of those testing machines would have moved along the seafloor. So this picture was actually taken 26 years. This test was actually done 26 years before this picture was taken. And so you can see that there's been very, very little recovery of this environment. It looks like it was almost done yesterday. And so that's because the machines have moved along, they've taken away the nodules, and they've also disturbed probably the top 10 centimeters or so of sediment, which is where most of the life in this ecosystem lives. They live within the sediment and they live attached to the nodules. And in fact, thanks to research that we've done in the last decade, we now know that about 50% of all the species living in this area where mining may happen soonest actually rely on the nodules as a place to attach to. So things like anemones, corals, sponges, without the nodules, they cease to exist. And so what we can say from that is that because the nodules form at a rate of 1 to 2 millimeters per million years, these nodules will not reform except on geological timescales, right? Like millions of years. So effectively, what we know is that the damage being done by this mining process in nodule plains will be irreversible. And not just on nodule plains, also at vents and crusts, which is again problematic. And so it's very clear though that the impacts will not just be at the seafloor. So that mining machine is going to, of course, disturb the seafloor and remove a lot of it, destroy that habitat and many of the species living there. But it's also going to create this plume from the disturbance. So all the movement will actually disturbed sediment will be kicked into the air and basically create like a dust storm, which you can see here called the collector plume. Then, as we said, it's going to be pumped to the surface to a ship, and then any waste, the waste plume, which has sediment, water of a different chemistry, some minerals will be pumped back into the ocean. And so this is going to extend the impacts from mining far beyond the actual mining activity itself. And so we'll do that for tens to hundreds of kilometers horizontally, as well as throughout the water column, from the sea surface right the way down to the seafloor. And so these plumes have the potential of blinding animals, smothering animals, clogging what they use to feed, etc. And then in addition to these plumes, there's also going to be noise and light. Noise on a scale that has never been seen in the deep ocean before, and that will have, again, profound impacts. And then even at the surface, there's going to be increased boat traffic, which could result in changes to, for instance, surface animals like turtles or tuna or whales will probably change their behavior. And so what we can say about all of these impacts is that it's not yet, the mechanisms by which it will happen are not yet known, but it is highly likely that these impacts, which are going to be on a local and regional scale, could impact key ecosystem services that we rely on. So things like fisheries could become contaminated with metals, or actually be changing in their change their movements as a result of them. We think that there's the potential for the ocean's ability to sequester carbon to be impacted. So, and also we could ultimately lose species functions and services, ecosystem services, before we really know and understand them, because our knowledge is so little. So, and I'm just going to move quickly through the last few slides. We know that the impacts of industrial scale deep sea mining will be direct as well as indirect, and will also be on a local, regional, and global scale. So I know Matt is going to talk a bit more about that, but we did a study that came out last year that showed that mining in one area called the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, where there are nodules, where there's the most interest, the scale of the impact will be equal to the area of Spain, Portugal, France, Belgium, and Germany combined. So over 1 million square kilometers. And then when you think about that from a volume perspective, because of course the ocean is three-dimensional, we're looking at about 6 million cubic kilometers just in this one area being impacted. And so this is concerning for a number of reasons, right? But also because this activity is likely going to be done in the absence of scientific knowledge. And as many of us know, you need a robust scientific baseline to be able to weigh change, right? To understand what the change is. You need to know what was first there. And so I led a study that came out last year that basically showed that although our scientific knowledge is increasing, gaps still dominate. So this chart you can see here, what you're looking for is the darkest colors on the chart. And so we analyzed lots of different scientific categories for each of the areas where there are mining leases granted. And we hope that we would see many dark colors, indicating that our knowledge is robust. We have enough knowledge to enable management. But actually what you can see here is there's mostly white blocks. And white blocks actually means there is no or next to no knowledge. And so what I want you to take away from this is that just 1% of the categories assessed had enough knowledge to enable management of deep seabed mining. Okay, so we really barely know anything about these ecosystems. And so because of this lack of scientific knowledge, this has led, and this rush, which you'll hear about from Matt, to mine the deep ocean, a place that we know so little about. This has led to a statement to evolve, which marine science and policy experts from around the world have signed. And that statement calls for a pause to the start of mining exploitation, because right now we're just in the exploration phase. And so we do not, many of us experts do not want mining to begin in the absence of scientific knowledge. We need to have information to be able to make informed decisions. And so as a result, more than 750 experts from around the world, including many from the Caribbean, have signed that statement. And I know there are several of the statements that you'll hear about from Matt today. So with that, thank you very much for listening. I recognize I've gone over in time. My apologies about that, but I really look forward to the questions at the end, and many thanks.
No need to apologize, Dr. Amon. That was definitely a very comprehensive and informative presentation on the science of deep sea mining, and really getting us to understand a bit about it. So now we are going to